over 83,000 full-time employees working in 537 agencies. It's a massive amount of, like I said, spending $1 billion a week. There are only 200 auditors in the auditor's office. There is no way they could possibly look at all of that government. So I take a cue from history, right? Johannes Gutenberg didn't write any books or invent the book. He invented the printing press and made books available to everyone, because prior to then, everything was hand-scribed on parchment. Suddenly, books became accessible, all kinds of books. Henry Ford didn't invent the car. Henry Ford developed the assembly line in mass production so that, again, everyone could afford a car, not just the rich. Because prior to then, if you were a very wealthy person, you had a car, or you could have one if you wanted one. We have the internet today that allows you and everyone on, out there watching on TV to be able to look at the books. And if you've got the ability to balance a checkbook, which I believe most of us do, to go to the market and unit price shop, right? You go to the supermarket and you go, well, let's see, that brand of orange juice is this much per gallon and this brand is that much per gallon. I'm going to get the cheaper one if I'm shopping on a budget, which I do. You can look at state contracts and say, well, wait a minute. Why did they pay, I know I can go down to the local office supply store and pay half what I saw that the state paid for that pen. And that's what we need to do. We need to enable millions of people to be able to look at what the state government is doing and find all the waste that the state possibly can't find itself.
Let's explore that one for a second. As you were talking, I was thinking about, I think it goes back probably not to the 80s when it was not exposed, I doubt, by federal auditors, probably by somebody like 2020 or something, that the government was spending, the old $3,000 for a hammer and $1,500 for a screwdriver and $12 for a washer.
That was 1982.
We're showing our age, aren't we? But so this, what 400 auditors in the state who would work under your department or within your department, they aren't capable of getting as granular as did we pay $1,200 for a screwdriver. You're asking the residents of the state to do that. And how do you propose that the residents get to see if we pay $1,200 or not?
So my approach, again, through the web, leveraging internet technologies, and I know that's not available to everyone. I talked to some people, not everyone uses the internet. Not everyone has access to the internet, but you can go down to the library or there's other places. The idea is to put everything on the internet, every transaction, every contract, everything on the internet, and give you a nice interface where you can search and you can filter. So you could look by agency, you could look by community, you could look by vendor, and you can burrow down. And maybe you want to search for pens or hammers or whatever it might be. And the idea is it's a concept called crowdsourcing. It's like open source software, which a lot of people have heard of in the technology world. It's open source government. Everyone gets involved. And that is really the tradition we have here in New England. We had town hall. Town hall was about everyone coming together in a room, hearing the issues, voting on spending and hiring, and you hashed it out very locally. And what's happened over the last 100, 200 years is a lot of government is congregated in Boston or on Beacon, in Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. We lose that transparency. The internet brings that back. Because now I can look at it at my schedule. If I come home at 9 o'clock at night from work, I can still look at it. I don't have to, how do I make it to the town hall meeting that we're having tonight? I can still review the books. And to that end, I've actually recently announced that we're working with a group called the Franklin Minutemen in the town of Franklin in Massachusetts, and we formed our first Citizens Audit Committee, and we are auditing the town of Franklin. So we've already requested a bunch of information. The comptroller from the town of Franklin has provided us the data, and we're now starting to process payroll information, vendor information, and because we recently stopped a Proposition 2.5 override there. Well, my friends did, that live in Franklin. And during those heated debates, as you know they can be,
certainly,
the town government admitted that they were overspending on things. And they said, because we have mandates from the state, and we have to buy off the state purchasing schedule. And in the same breath, they said, well, so we want to lay off some cops. And the townspeople said, well, wait a minute.
Which is, of course, the first thing we talk on our show a lot about that. The first thing they go after is the hot button issues: police, fire, teachers.
Right. And
not anybody in the middle management or anything else. Let's go after what's going to upset the public.
Right. Now, one interesting thing, one unintended, I guess, benefit of the economic downturn we're in now, as you've been looking around the state, is a lot of cities and towns are finding that contractors are now coming in below estimates on their bid. And it's because times are tight, and so contractors are all out to make a buck, and they're willing to go a little lower if it means they might be able to outdo someone else.
Certainly beats not getting the job at all.
Right.
We're with Kamal Jain today. He's running for state auditor. Mm-hmm. We have about 6 or so minutes, 7 minutes maybe left in our segment here. Let's talk a little bit about your transparency, give us your website again.
Masstransparency.com is my website.
Masstransparency.com. That's the best website to go, because if you're like me, you're going to have a hard time saying Kamal or even spelling
Right.
it. But so masstransparency.com, we can learn a lot more about you. One of the things we talked about in the green room, Kamal, was issues with the transportation budgets, the lack of accountability in the state pension funds. We mentioned $1 billion a week. There's always Deval Patrick. There's always the spinning revolving door at the speaker's desk. Take 5 minutes and roll with it. Tell us how you would be different and what you would do to help our state get out of the morass it's been in for so long.
Well, we need to continue to, the auditor's office has a job. They have a role. The law is very loose. It says they've got to audit each state agency at least once every 2 years. And I think that's nowhere near enough. We need to audit all of the state government essentially every day. And that's where my idea of bringing all the people of Massachusetts into it comes in. They will back up the auditors. The auditors will be then freed up to focus on things. So when a bunch of people, let's say you happen to find something in your community, the state auditor's office could be alerted to that and focus in on that particular scandal, whatever it might be. You found out that there was overspending in an area or waste or whatever it might have been. The people will empower the auditor's office to be able to look in every area. We'll set up, when I'm auditor, we'll have an anonymous tip line for government waste. We'll have, we'll set up a rewards program, right? I mean, something I learned from people who've been in the military is the military actually offers financial incentives. If you find a way for the military to save money, they will, up to a certain amount, give you a portion of the savings, toward as a bonus, and they'll recognize you. You'll get some 3 or 4-star general who'll put you on a stage, shake your hand, give you a ribbon, and say, "Here's a check." And you've just saved the taxpayers millions of dollars in many cases. So it's a win-win. And we need to bring that down. And just like you talked about, you were referring to the Grace Commission earlier, the the $500 hammer and all those things under Reagan's first term. You know how he did that? He brought in private business people. J. Peter Grace, which is what the commission is named for, brought 2,000 volunteer citizens in who were people like me, who were accountants, who were auditors. And they looked at the federal government. And after 2 years, they determined that you could cut over 31% of federal spending and not affect any core government services. 31%. How much waste do we have in Massachusetts? Right? But we're not going to do it because President Reagan said, he pulled his friend in. He said, look, you and I know there's waste in government, but we know that the people that work in government have a conflict of interest to do a good job at finding it. And I think there's a lot of good people in government. We need to remember that. But they don't have the right incentives. Right, so we want to incentivize them to expose waste.
Because they feel they're putting themselves out of business or out of a job, right?
Right. Or they're being a whistleblower or whatever it might be. So you want to reward them. Typically the way it works, it's a positive and negative reward system. So give them a positive reward. If they save the state and the taxpayers money, give them an incentive. Recognize them. Put them on the state's website. Get them on the news. Get them on this TV program. Get people more involved. And it's all about civic engagement.
A question I was thinking about. How would you, of course, the Obama administration tells us all about every bill, the health care bill, it'll be on there for, days and days before we pretend to vote on it or even pretend to read it. Suppose that you're elected and you say, this is great, I'm going to go put these, every single bill and every expenditure, or at least every expenditure right on the website. Who could stop you? Anybody?
By law, as long as it's public information, no one can stop me. The one thing they can try to do is take away some of my funding. So if I say I need money to build a website to publish this, they might try to cut my funding. Now, one of the things I've already committed to doing, I've made 3 pledges that some people are familiar with as my run for auditor. I'm limiting myself to 2 terms. I will not serve more than 2 terms as auditor.
And how long is the term?
It's 4 years.